McKim. Senator Patterson, you have the call.
Thanks, Chair. With your permission, I'd like to share this bracket with my colleague, Senator Ruston. I have one question to ask and then I'll offer the call to her. Sure. How much is the government planning to reduce in spending on border enforcement over the forward estimates?
Do you wish to be assisted by the Chief Financial Officer? So, Ms Cargill, you can do a reprise, or is this an encore?
Senator Stephanie Cargill, Chief Finance Officer.
I'll just repeat the question while you get settled. How much is the government planning to reduce on expenditure on border enforcement over the forward estimates?
So the program 3.4, border enforcement. So I can advise the departmental approach is reducing from 22-23 of $1.079 billion to $1.057 billion, and then to $885 million, $893 million and $904 million across the forward estimates. So if I can explain the reduction between 22-23 and 23-24, which is a small reduction of $21 million. It's mostly related to the ceasing of the terminating measure from 1920, which was a whole of government drug strategy measure. And it's an increase due to the 23-24 budget measure for the passenger movement charge funding of $3.8 million. But the major component of the reduction is actually related to the fact that the 22-23 budget was overspent in 22-23, forming part of our overarching operating loss, which is causing a reduction into 23-24, and also some parameter adjustments of $15.3 million. In relation to the year after that, what you're seeing there is actually the reduction of our annual estimates variation amount we get in support of Operation Sovereign Borders, which is revisited annually in the budget, and that's the majority of that decrease into.
And that's a much more substantial increase, decrease, isn't it?
Correct. There's a large increase into the 23-24 budget. For that estimates variation, we don't normally talk about individual estimates variation amounts and estimates, but you can see that large increase, and that is falling off in the 24-25 year, and then we have economic parameter adjustments increasing the budget across the forwards. But obviously that annual component, which has been consistent for the last number of years, is considered annually by government.
So but as it stands, all we have is the budget papers and the forward estimates. Correct. So what is the planned total cut in spending on border enforcement over the next 4 years?
Well, I just read out the numbers to you, Senator. I haven't got the cumulative total.
Is it about $600 million?
No.
Over the next 4 years on border enforcement?
So program 3.4 border enforcement is reducing from 1.197 in 23-24 to 1043632 in 26-27.
Yep, cumulatively over 4 years.
Over the forward estimates.
Yep, so from 23-24 to 24-25 is a drop from 1197260 to 1026607.
Yep.
Which is less than 200 million.
Yep. And
then it's actually increasing over the next 2 years.
Yes, but from the total, the reduction remains over the 3 years. So cumulatively, had it not just continued as it was or indexed as you might expect it to be, cumulatively it's about $600 million, isn't it?
Well, if you take that first year and add that reduction cumulatively per year, but if you look at the net number...
Which was my question.
Right. So yes, I haven't done those sums in my head as I'm sitting here, but the net reduction is not that much.
But is it about $600 million?
It would be, yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I don't know why I have to ask 4 or 5 follow-up questions to get an answer to a very straightforward question. A $600 million reduction cumulatively over 4 years on expenditure on border enforcement is a very significant reduction.
You use the term planned reduction. We went through this yesterday. I respectfully contest that it's not a planned reduction. If I could go back 9 budgets, I could accumulate all of the planned reductions, to use the phraseology, Senator, that you've just used, and the cuts would be even deeper. And what happens at every MyEFO, and you complimented me on my confidence yesterday, well, I've been confident and lucky 9 times over with 3 now onto 4 treasurers. There's always an adjustment made in relation to Operation Sovereign Borders, which is always the biggest moving amount, the estimates variation, and government always, in my experience, consider very carefully propositions that come forward to shore up and to reinforce the Border Force's maritime capability, its detention capability and so on and so forth. So when you look at the numbers in those terms, as Ms Cargill's advised, arithmetically it does add up to the number you've indicated, but you said there was a planned reduction. I could make the same point about the budget that was brought down in 2021, 1920.
You could, although you're not being asked about that.
Well, I'm providing
asking you
context so the committee fully understands how budgeting outside of the Department of Defence works.
Your argument, Mr Pizzullo, is basically we should just disregard 3 out of 4 years of the forward estimates, that won't eventuate, that what the Treasurer tells us about how much the government plans to spend in the budget he brought down only a couple of weeks ago, we should just disregard, because it won't eventuate in actuality.
And I could ground truth that by going back over 10 budgets. The estimates that we get outside of the immediate coming year, so in this case 23-24, the estimates that is brought down in any budget never reflects the funding that I receive, ever.
Well, that's not what the Treasurer says on budget night. That's not what he says in all of his interviews afterwards. He tells us what the surplus and the deficit is going to be for the next 4 years, and it is based on these numbers in his budget, and you're saying we should just disregard it.
Well, all I've got is my lived experience. I could go back over 10 budgets, whether it was Treasurer Hockey or Treasurer Morrison or Treasurer Frydenberg, and the estimate beyond the immediate appropriate, which is always the number that you're going to get appropriated, is an estimate that is put in subject to estimates variations, strategic environment, forthcoming contracts, decisions not yet taken, new policy proposals. I've just been around too long.
I understand all of that, Mr Pizzullo, but $600 million is a lot of money. It has to come from somewhere. It has to come from somewhere else in the budget. So basically what you're saying is the government is going to have to either make secret cuts that they haven't announced in the forward estimates or secret tax increases that they haven't announced in the forward estimates in order to give you the money that you say you will need to meet these challenges.
No, I dispute that entirely and respectfully, Senator, because there's also revenue variations. We've just seen a surplus brought down, which was based on the very conservative assumptions about certain parameters that proved to be mercifully too conservative, and then the government makes choices about how much it banks to its deficit position and its debt position and how much it spends on...
We're all very happy about that, but we can't guarantee that happening every year, can we?
It's not about guaranteeing it. What you're saying is that I've got to now be planning from not 23-24 but from 24-25 to dramatically cut my operations because I need to bank on that number being the true number. I can tell you I'll go to my EFO, I'll go to next year's budget, I'll go to my EFO after that, and it'll look nothing like that. That's the nature of estimates, and that's why you have estimates variations to do with not new policy proposals but the volumetric effect of activities.
Sure, and if we're talking about a few million here or there, I can understand why we could be cautious. But this is $600 million on border protection. We just heard from Admiral Jones that the operational tempo has increased, not decreased, and there's no reason to expect that will change any time in the future. He said that criminals are telling lies about our border protection policies and trying to exploit vulnerable people. They're not going to stop doing that tomorrow. So how can we be planning to reduce our expenditure and then saying, oh, don't worry, we'll just find $600 million down the back of the couch?
That's your characterisation of the couch. In terms of the Senator's mention of the variations tend to be modest, some of those EVs swing 300 or 400, 500 million, don't they?
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll share the call with Senator Ruston.
Just before you